Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to welcome everyone to one of our Walker Business Connections workshops, What is Strong with You? I hope that you are able to join us for several workshops over the course of today and tomorrow, and then of course our career fair on Friday. But I'm happy you're joining us today. My name is Maureen Cathey. I am one of the career coaches in the Walker College of Business Business Career Services office. And so some of you I know I've met previously, some of you we may not have met before, so I'm excited to have you here today and interact, and wanted to let you know a few things as we're getting started. I do have a co-pilot helping me with this session. So Gracie is one of our Walker Fellows and is going to kind of be monitoring that chat room and keeping an eye on it and helping with any other issues that we have. So I want to thank her for joining us today and let you know that she is here and available if you need to chat with her as well if you're having any technical difficulties or problems. We are recording this session, so I just want to make everyone aware of that. You did all enter in on mute, and just so that we can keep kind of those communication lines clear, we're going to have you stay on mute for right now. Later, as we have some time at the end, perhaps for questions, we can probably allow people to unmute themselves and do that. In the meantime, if you have questions, please use the chat box to type those in. Grace is going to keep an eye on that, and I'll try and keep an eye on that. If there's something really relevant to what we're in at that moment, we'll stop and answer that question. If not, we'll try and get all those questions answered at the end of our time together. All right, so again, Maureen, Cathey, and I'm happy that you're here today for our What is Strong with You session. So let's jump right in. So what is wrong with you? We may have heard someone say something like this to us in frustration. We may have said this to ourselves as we have our kind of negative self-talk at times when something isn't going well. But how often do we flip that around and think, what is strong with you? I don't think we give ourselves kind of the grace to do that very often. So today, that's a little bit of what we're going to do. We're going to explore how switching our focus from what is wrong with us to what is right with us will help us to truly develop our strengths. And those are going to be assets to us in our lives, whether that be personally, whether it be in our university interactions, whether it be assets to our team in our future workplaces. It's going to be important to know what those are and to put some focus on there. We can really develop those talents further if we know what they are, put a focus there, develop the language to tell our unique story as well. I think for many of you, you may be networking this week and doing some interactions at the career fair and perhaps introducing yourself. It's important to be able to do that and tell our story and have the language to be able to do that. It's also great if it's not maybe the same language that everybody hears every minute. So developing kind of that knowledge of our strengths and a language base is going to be really important. You may not have spent much time thinking about this to this point because we often take our strengths for granted. We just do things using our strengths and our talents. We don't even realize how much we're depending on them because they just kind of come naturally. So it's often kind of where our focus is drawn as to where maybe we have a weaker area, where we think we have a weakness, because we try to maybe fixate on that or work on improving it. And today we really want to look at maybe that it's a better choice to focus on discovering and building our talents, our greatest talents, that will put us maybe more on the road to the success path that we want to be on. I'm always a fan of this quote, and I think it's important right now in these times to really rely on our strengths and think about how that's going to help us get through maybe some challenging times. So much of the idea behind the information I'm going to share with you today, it comes from a positive psychology approach with a focus on what is right with people rather than what is wrong. And I certainly have an interest in this approach, so that's why I wanted to do this session today. And many of my thoughts come from my training as a Gallup CliftonStrengths coach. I'm a certified coach. So that's where some of these kind of ideas are drawn from. Some of you may be familiar with CliftonStrengths. It's also called StrengthsFinder or StrengthsQuest or Strengths for Students. Some of you may have taken that assessment before. If you haven't, that is fine as well. I just wanted to touch on that. That's where I'm drawing some of this material from. And I'll also touch on that tool a little bit later in the presentation and tell you a little bit more about it. But it is based on almost 6 decades of research from Gallup. It's related to how people process information, build relationships, interact with the world around them. That's where that comes from. It's actually also found in more than 90% of Fortune 500 companies, and thousands of schools use this as well. So you may encounter this as you enter into the workforce as a part of your professional development. And then more than 23 million people in the world have taken CliftonStrengths. So it's got a lot of basis there. So that's just where some of that comes from. So let's forge ahead and explore what is strong with you. Okay, so talent and strengths, I'm going to use some of those words kind of interchangeably throughout this presentation, but I did want to focus a little bit on what truly is maybe the difference between a talent and a strength. Talent is really a naturally recurring pattern of thought or feeling, behavior that you productively apply to something. And it's a part of who you are. It's part of your being. It is generally something that's more internal. It may be hidden. Some people may not know what your talents are, depending on how you utilize them and what you've built upon. But it does indicate some potential. It often are things that are motivators for us, really the soul of the person. Then there are talent themes or categories. So if we tried to list all the talents in the world, there'd be trillions of those. So we have to kind of categorize some things and come up with some theme categories. So if someone says that they have talent within communication, that's kind of a theme, overarching theme talent, because it might be that they are very talented in always finding the right word, or they may be very talented in telling stories and sharing stories with others, have a natural tendency to just be able to communicate their thoughts. All those are different types of talents within communication. And you might have all of those, you might have just one of those and still be a communicator, to have a talent in communication. A strength then is when we take that talent, we invest in it, and then we have the ability to consistently provide near perfect performance in our tasks or produce a really positive outcome. Often if you are utilizing your strength, you feel like you're kind of in the flow, really kind of in that moment of glimpses of excellence in yourself. You may be learning things really rapidly. You may be really satisfied with what you're producing. So that's often where we know we're working in that area of strengths. It's a little bit more on the doing side. More people can see that because we're utilizing those talents that we've invested in as strengths, and there are outcomes associated with that then, and it often is associated a little bit more with our roles, and that could be work or professionally, it could be as a student, it could be as a family member, all different types of roles. But that's kind of a little bit of where I wanted to give you of the balance and difference between talents and strengths. So when you have a talent, which we said is that natural way of thinking and feeling or behaving, and then you invest in it, that's where you can develop that into a strength. And so that's where we were saying at the very beginning, if we focus on what is wrong with us, we're not maybe spending the time investing in our talents and what is actually strong with us. So, investment might be time practicing and utilizing this talent. It may be developing those skills sets, learning more and gaining more knowledge in that area. Then that way that builds into that strength, which is a little bit more getting us to the perfect performance level. So my example of this real quick is Michael Jordan. Some of you may have been watching The Last Dance or something on Netflix lately. But so Michael Jordan definitely has a talent that he was born with in terms of athletic ability and basketball. But then he obviously as well has invested in that talent, spent time practicing, building his knowledge and skills of the game, all of those types of things to make that a true strength, where he is able to consistently, have near perfect performance. Now, if you take me, for instance, I probably rank really low on the talent in terms of basketball. Now, can I go out and do it? Yes. Have I invested time and energy into that talent that is very minimal? No. And so it is not a strength of mine. It's going to be much more difficult for me. It's going to be more frustrating for me when I'm playing a game of basketball than it is for someone like Michael Jordan. But that's also why I'm not over investing time into that area, because I know it's not a true talent that I have. So just thinking about that in terms of, again, thinking about where am I going to invest my time? Where am I going to try and develop things that are really truly talents that I want to bring forward, or if I'm just causing more frustration for myself. So I want to kind of make sure that we're going in a really positive direction this morning, since we're talking about what is strong with us. So I've wanted to kind of have that mindset of that strong positivity. So I want you, if you are willing and able, I know some people might be on a mobile device and can't do this, but you can change your name that's in Zoom. If you've been on here before, you're able to hover over your picture and those three dots, you can do a name change. Think first about what name you've chosen to be called, and you're going to continue to have that in there. But then think of one positive word people use to describe you. You might take just a second to do that. And then if you are able and choose to, you can go ahead and replace your name with your chosen name and that positive word. If you can't put it in the name section and want to just type in the chat your name and a positive word, that's fine as well. If you choose just to keep that kind of for yourself this morning, also fine. I just want to put us in that positive place so that everybody can think about a word that people use to describe you that is positive. So I'm going to be quiet for just a second while you think of that, and maybe take a moment to make that change if you want to. All right, so hopefully you've at least had a chance to think of a positive word. So even if you are just keeping that to yourself, that kind of positive word probably relates to a talent and hopefully even a strength that you have that others see in you. A positive word is, you know, something unique and valuable and that others find value in when they think of you. Thinking about what others think about us, sometimes it's helpful to really hone in on what our strengths are. Because if I had just said, what's a word that you use to describe you, a positive word, that sometimes is a little bit more challenging to immediately think of. It's oftentimes easier to think of what someone else would say about us and how they would refer to us in a positive way. So I see some words like passionate and caring, supportive, amicable, compassionate, kind, all wonderful, positive, true talents and strengths that we have and may not always invest as much in or consider. So that is great to kind of start us off here this morning with our positive ideas. All right. Thank you for sharing those things. So thinking too about why we're thinking about strengths and developing those and putting some time into them, obviously that can lead to success. And so this quote here says that the key to success is to fully understand how to apply our greatest talents and strengths in our everyday life, and putting some focus there, obviously. So again, sometimes people will say, well, I need to be a really well-rounded individual. I think it's important to be well-rounded in terms of having a diverse knowledge of things and set of skills that will help you to complete a task or do your job. At the same time, if we try for perfection in all of those areas, we're really going to set ourselves up for not meeting that level and probably not really spending time investing in what truly could be a strength for us. Just a quick example of that, if you think again about our sports example, I'm a Peyton Manning fan. So Peyton Manning has a really competitive drive to be the best. He sees the action on the field, you know, before it happens, wants to learn all he can about the game. Obviously is a very successful athlete who has used his strengths very well. J.K. Rowling, an author who is able to communicate and connect and has a vision and a story and influences others through that story. Both very successful people. And they have other talents than those that I just mentioned, but they are not going to come to the level of that same perfection that they might have in those specific areas. So they aren't necessarily what you would consider well-rounded and perfect and able to achieve perfection in all the areas. They're maximizing their potential in the areas where they know they have that talent and have performed with excellence and can do that consistently. So a strengths-based approach would say that every person has unique talents, and when you understand them, you can sharpen them. That will lead to success for you. And that maybe we need to give up a little bit on the idea of being perfect in every area. So perfect well-roundedness, and instead focus on those natural talents. And what we also find is that then when you focus on your talents and make those strengths, when you're a part of a group or team, which most of the work that we do is in some way part of a group or team, then we can rely on others' strengths to kind of fill in and make us a well-rounded team or group as a whole, even if we have some areas that aren't falling into that strength category as highly. All right. Let me get this to move on to my next slide. There we go. So people who focus on their strengths are 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life. This comes from some Gallup research. And they're 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs. So it really is some evidence that that's kind of where success can come from, is focusing on using strengths. There were also some studies that they did across all kinds of industries and jobs, and people who have the opportunity to use and develop their strengths, it really has played a role in their success, the job that they've been able to achieve, or even their pay scale. So a strengths-based approach has been proved to improve a person's confidence, direction, hope, even kindness towards others if you're able to be working in that zone of strength. Many people, though, aren't able to focus on that or work in that zone of what they do best. Some other research has shown that more than 10 people, million worldwide that they surveyed, 1 in 3 strongly agreed with at work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. So that means 2 in 3 do not have that. So there are so many benefits from being able to work within your strengths. First, you have to know what those are and develop those, and then think about that as you are looking for those roles, as you are thinking about how you're going to interact in a job going forward. And then these are some other examples of what people that are working in that strength zone have said. They're able to achieve more, they have that more positive outlook. Okay, so I'm going to run through this pretty quickly because if we were in person, it would be really fun to do this exercise and get us moving around a little bit. So that's why that says stand up. I'm not going to actually ask you to stand up, although if you'd like to do that, you can do that. But in this case, we're going to just allow people, if you're on camera and want to raise your hand, or if you want to use the little hand emoji, hand raise emoji on your screen. Or again, if you just want to think about whether you would be standing for this, that is fine as well. But I want us to think about a few of these topics. So basically, raise your hand or think about if you almost always talk to people in elevators, airplanes, grocery stores, wherever you go. Think about if that's you. I see a couple hands raised. Okay, all right. Just keep that in mind. Think about this one. Do you have a color-coded or otherwise organized closet? Okay, let's see here. Go to the next one. How about raise your hand if you write down a list of things to do and you stick to it, even to the point of on your weekends? Okay, a lot of people do that. People on here. All right, how about this one? Raise your hand if you almost always need to pick someone to race while driving in your mind. You're picking who you're getting ahead of and who you're racing. Not as many with that one. All right. And then how about if you almost always tend to ask too many questions, are told that you ask too many questions? Okay, a few people with that one. How about if you push the elevator button to remind the elevator that you are there? I saw a double hand with that one. I'm kind of curious. Samuel, if you don't mind unmuting for a second, where does that come from, you think? Or
That's a great question. I have no idea, but I'm definitely the type of person that when I see an elevator button, I'll press it 6 times just to make sure that it knows that I want to go up or down. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I've got another one for you. I don't have a slide for this one, but how about you discover the plot of the movie before the end? Okay. And then some of us share that to the annoyance of our friends. All right, so the reason I had you think about these things is that some of these things are things that we might find quirky or even frustrating at times, or don't even know where they come from. Like for instance, that very first one, if you're able to kind of have a conversation started no matter where you are with anyone, a stranger. That can sometimes for me, like if I'm stuck on a plane next to someone who has that as something that they almost always do, it can be a bit of a frustration. I'm like, I'm trapped here with this person. But what these things are is that they're really a part of the natural talent and powers that you have. So what I should be thinking about is that this person has a talent and a power to really make connections with others, no matter who they are, probably to win people over, and it maybe a really genuine interest in others. So all those are talents, and they're developing them into a strength, and it manifests itself in kind of some of these different ways. But not everybody, of course, is the same. So you may have, as you kind of saw who you could see on the screen, I'm not sure how many people you can see on the screen you're looking at, but you may have noticed that there were some that several people had in common. There were others that only a few people had their hands raised on. So it might be surprising to some people that I've had conversations before with people when I do this and they say, I thought everyone did that. I thought everyone pushed the button 6 times to get the elevator to come to them, or I thought everyone picked a car to race while they were driving and trying to get somewhere. And then some people are surprised that others do what they do because they think, I thought I was the only one to do this. So again, this comes from are naturally occurring talents. And they can come out sometimes as quirks or idiosyncrasies, like I said, but they're really natural behaviors that we apply to different situations. No one taught us to do it. More likely than not, we may have observed other people doing it, but they just come from a natural place. And so anything that is a talent like that, it can have its negative side. So what we want to focus on is how we can build it into a positive strength. All right. So again, just going back to that theme of talent, naturally recurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior. And so here's this slide that lists some examples. And again, effortlessly and instinctively starting conversations. That's that person who can talk to anyone, right? That's a much different approach than what we might think if we're the person stuck next to them, is thinking about their talent in that positive way. And everyone has talents. If you didn't raise your hand on any of these, it doesn't mean that I just didn't touch on some of those kind of underlying quirks and idiosyncrasies that are talents. But everyone has them, but hasn't really necessarily transformed them into strengths. You can really be more authentic in your leading and in your interactions with others if you try to recognize what your strengths are and then really lean into those and develop those. And then of course that can help if we're again, back to that team idea, it can help the whole team if we can really work on utilizing our strengths and then partner with others that have strengths in other areas. All right, so we're going to do another activity that some of you may be able to physically do and some may not. If you are somewhere where you have a piece of paper and a pen or a writing utensil, if you could kind of grab that and have that in front of you. If you do not have that around, that is perfectly fine as well. I'm going to ask you to sort of air guitar this and just do kind of use your finger as your writing utensil and your hand and kind of, like I said, kind of air write. So what we're going to do is I want you to have that paper in front of you if you have that. And we're going to write this statement so that I use my strengths every day. Don't do it yet. But we're going to try and do this in a way that we kind of keep track a little bit of how long it takes us to do this. And we want to be doing it kind of efficiently, but also cleanly, neatly, and effectively. And so you can even maybe look up or put your hand up when you finish it so I can kind of gauge a little bit how quickly we were able to do this. So is everybody kind of ready with either the pen, or again, you can just do it with your finger. But before you start, I want you all to switch. I want you to use your non-dominant hand. So if you had your pen in your right hand, switch to your left. If you had it in your left, switch to your right. And I want you to write this sentence 3 times. Ready, set, go. All right, I know some people are still working on it, but I've gotten some thumbs up, some look ups to the screen. So we're gonna, some thumbs down. So if anybody is willing and is on the screen, you can even hold up your page and let us see maybe what your sentences look like. Some people are like, no, I'm not willing to. All right, I'm seeing some sentences. Okay. It took a couple of minutes for people to do that, and I think some people weren't even quite done yet. Now I want you to, of course, you know I was going to go this way. Switch your hands back to your dominant hand. So writing utensil in your dominant hand. And I'm going to write the same sentence 3 times. You can write it beside it or below it or whatever. And we're going to see how quickly this one went. So ready, set, go. All right, I'm already seeing some thumbs up and some eyes up. Some people are still working, but I think the majority of us are good. All right, so that was a lot more efficient with our time, a lot quicker in terms of people getting that completed. So I'm kind of curious to get some reactions here. I can see some of your faces, and I saw some kind of thumbs down and groans and smirks with the first activity. I didn't see that as much with the second. But if you want, we don't have too many people on here. If you want to unmute and share, if you want to type into the chat, maybe kind of what words you would use to describe what it felt like the first time. So the non-dominant hand time that you wrote.
I would say uncomfortable. Uncomfortable,
okay. Any other
I would
words?
I would say annoying because I knew I could do it, but it wasn't coming out.
Okay, uncomfortable, annoying. We know it took more time.
I would say difficult.
Okay, difficult to do it with the non-dominant hand. Any other, I've got in the chat, it looks like foreign. Haven't written with that hand in a while. Any other words to describe that? How about on the other side? How about doing it with your dominant hand, the hand that you would normally use to write?
Pretty smooth.
Natural. Go ahead.
Smooth.
Smooth. Natural. Second nature. Effortless. Yeah, and somebody put in the chat too that for the first time, it was more like a roller coaster. Sometimes it was easy to get a letter, and then sometimes it went down really quickly and downhill really quickly. I would say too, probably that most people, when you're doing this exercise, did you have to think more when you were using your non-dominant hand than your dominant hand? How to make the letters, you know, obviously we spent more time on it. So I want you to think about this in then correlation with using your talents. If you are working in a place that comes from that natural side, it's going to be more efficient. It's going to go faster. It's probably, I didn't have people share, but I'm sure if we held up the pages, it would look a little neater, probably be more what we expect. And if we were trying to make a perfect sentence, those are all the things that would happen if we're in that natural space. Same thing, you know, when we're using our talents. If we're using our natural talents and our strengths, things are going to flow a lot easier. They are going to feel more effortless and more natural. If we are using or being forced to kind of come from a place maybe of weakness or an area where we don't have as much natural talent, doesn't mean you couldn't do it. Everybody seemed to be able to produce something with the non-dominant hand, but it might not be our best work. It might not be done as quickly and efficiently. So that's, again, what you can remember as, you know, if you are able. Now, I'm certainly not saying that in like your work or in your schoolwork or something like that, you don't occasionally have to do things from a place that doesn't feel as great because it is a little bit more challenging for you. But what maybe this session will help you to do is think about, where are my natural strengths, talents, and strengths And how can I maybe do this task from a different perspective or a different way that will allow me to be more in that natural and effortless state, rather than struggling to do it in a way that doesn't feel natural. So definitely something to think about, both as you're trying to accomplish certain goals, or just in general as you're thinking about, again, where do I want to focus and develop my time? Because for some people, if you spent a lot of time, you could probably get that non-dominant hand. And some people are ambidextrous, or some people have, broke a hand when they were young and had to use that a lot. But for most of us, it would take a good period of time to really develop that non-dominant hand into something that we were proud of at the end. So again, where do we want to put our focus and our time? All right, thank you for participating in that activity. So this is a quote again. I mentioned that a lot of this comes from CliftonStrengths, and Don Clifton was a psychologist who developed that tool. But I just really like this quote of what will happen when we think about what is right with people rather than fixating on what is wrong with them. And that's what we tend to do in a lot of leadership roles. That's what people do is, a performance review. They think, or you're great. They're fixating on what is wrong with you and trying to move that along. But if we really focus on what is right, we can probably achieve the same goals that are expected of us, but again, in a lot more of that effortless way. So some people always ask then too about, well, does this mean that you just totally ignore weaknesses? There's nothing wrong with being aware of your weaknesses, and we should be, and managing them and knowing how to do that. But again, my point with this is that our greatest opportunity to maybe combat those weaknesses and then to get to a place of maximizing our success would be if we can focus on those strengths. And so we address the weaknesses by not fixating on them, by taking a more unique approach and working on things with our strengths. All right, so strength spotting. I wanted to get into real quickly. I've kind of gone over the importance of this, but it's like, well, how do I do this? As I mentioned when we talked about our positive word, for some of you, it may have been a little bit of a thinking exercise, a struggle to come up with that positive word to describe yourself. If you've never taken one of these assessments, you may not truly have given a lot of thought to what your strengths are. So I want you to have some ways that you can maybe research yourself and develop a set of language to use around these strengths. So as I said, one way is just to kind of do some self-research, self-thought, self-thinking. But when we do that, people often struggle a little bit because we don't often go around maybe tooting our own horn and talking about all the things that are great about us. And so when you sit down to develop a list of your strengths and your talents, it may be a little bit more challenging. I bet if I asked you right now to think about a person, actually we'll do this, think about a person in your head that you admire, that you think is a very, accomplished individual. And once you have that person kind of pictured in your mind, think about what words you would use to describe them. What words would you use to describe their talents and strengths? So just think about that for a second. And now that you've done that, now I want you to picture yourself. And I want you to think about words that you would use to describe your talents and strengths. Now, I need to give you a lot more time to really, truly do this. But since we only have so much time together, I'm going to move us along. But I would be curious if you want to put in the chat, was there a difference in thinking about someone else's strengths and talents versus yours? Easier, harder, faster, slower? And maybe you didn't find a difference. But I've got someone who's willing to say harder to think about mine, easier to think about others. usually the list comes a little bit more quickly to us. If I'm thinking about someone I really admire, I can come up with several words right away, and then I would come up with more time. For myself, if you haven't spent time doing this recently or previously, it takes a little bit more time to do that. So sometimes we can use a tool then, or something else to help prompt us to think about all these wonderful talents and strengths that we have, because you know that you have them. We want to do some personal research. So that's where this slide gives you some ideas of how you can do this strength spotting. So obviously I'm going to mention the Gallup CliftonStrengths assessment because that's again where some of this research comes from. There is an assessment tool called CliftonStrengths for students that you can take. There is a fee associated with it. If you take the one for students, and you can because you have a .edu email address, then it is a reduced price. So it's $12 rather than $20 to take this assessment. And I've got the website there. It's basically at strengthsquest.com. If you do this assessment, you're going to get a report. And so that can give you some language, some knowledge about yourself and your strengths, and also some language to use as you're trying to describe yourself maybe to others in a personal commercial or in a resume or cover letter. So that is one tool. And of course, if you choose to take that assessment and want to dive a little deeper into it, again, it's one of the things you can get on Handshake and sign up an appointment for me to do a coaching session together. Some other tools, the VIA Character Strength Survey. This is another tool at viacharacter.org that will give you a report. This one is free. It will ask you if you want the full report, and you can pay for that. It's really not necessary to get the full report. You really get a lot out of that free initial report. So that's another tool that you can use. The Big 5 personality traits and the 300 question personality test, also free, just to play around with and get information kind of about yourself. These can both be found, as well as links to other assessments, can be found on truity.com. So that's the website that's listed there. So these are just some assessment kind of tools where you're going to answer questions, and then it's going to give you kind of a report and some feedback and some language. Another thing to do is to do a flow exercise. So a flow exercise is where it's best if you can kind of do this with a partner. You can do it on your own, but if you can do it with a partner, think about a time when you had a big success, something that you accomplished, something that you were so pumped about afterwards and excited, and share that experience with another person. Describe that to them. And then that person should be able to hear, as you're describing that experience, some of those talents and strengths come through, and hopefully you'll be able to recognize and hear that yourself as well. If you're describing that time when you were in the flow, in the zone, that's going to showcase when you were using those talents and strengths. So if you can do that, that's another way. If you're kind of struggling just to come down and sit and come up with a list, think about times when you feel like you've been really accomplished, and that can kind of help generate some ideas there. So those are all some ways that you can develop ideas about your strengths. Another tool is this kind of sheet of talents and strengths and traits and transferable skills that I have in a Google Doc. So I am actually going to share in the chat. Let's see if that will go through. That is a link to this Google Doc. And this is, again, just another place where you can get some language. And if you go through, and it kind of has some directions on it, but, circle or underline, mark the ones that you feel like are descriptive of you. And then even go back and think of the ones, put a star by the ones that are the top, and the ones that you really kind of are your go-tos, that you rely on, that other people see in you. Those are all ways that you can, again, think about your strengths and develop the language around them so that you can describe those strengths and talents to others. So that is just yet another tool that you can use. All right. So we are coming close to the end of our time, so I want to give you a little bit of an action item to go forward, and then open things up if there are any questions. So I want you to maybe think about over the next week or a week or so. I know lots going on this week because I want you to be going to the career fair and things, but it might be good to do this exercise ahead of that time. Do some research and exploration of yourself. We often talk about how we want you to research a company, research a position before you apply for it. Well, I want you to do a little bit of research on yourself. And so maybe using one of those strength spotting tools that we just talked about, you can take time to discover some of your strengths. And all of this will then relate to developing the language that you want to use. So once you understand those and they are kind of at the top of your mind, it will be a lot easier when someone asks you the question, what's a positive word to describe yourself? What are your top 3 strengths? And maybe if they're asking that in an interview, or if you're just wanting to introduce yourself in a networking situation and put your best foot forward, these strengths will all be then sort of more at the tip of your tongue. They'll be in your head, and you'll have some great language and words to use to describe yourself. Because the other piece I want people to recognize is that while these are great strengths to have, no doubt, hardworking, good leader, and a great communicator are probably words that recruiters hear all the time from people. So even if those are your top strengths, what are some different words and some different language that you can use to describe those strengths? And then just knowing yourself, examples of that and times when you really are showcasing those things are going to be important. And this is whether you're writing a cover letter, a resume, doing a personal commercial, introducing yourself, interviewing. All these things will help you once you've named those strengths. So my action item for you is to do a little research on yourself. Think about what those strengths are so that you can invest in them and so that you can convey them to other people. You might recognize a strength in yourself that you never even really thought about before, and allows you to kind of build on that and celebrate it and strengthen it. So we're going to turn our mindsets this week to what is strong with you. And I thank you very much for your attention and time. We've got a few minutes before we're wrapping up that I am happy to answer any questions that you might have about anything that we've talked about, or if there are any questions in the chat. I don't know if that I saw any coming up in there, but you're welcome to either put something in the chat now or unmute yourself and ask. Well, it looks like I've hopefully covered this topic pretty well then. I'm going to go with that. If you do have other questions, because I know that there probably are some out there and you're just not really wanting to ask them right now, or if you develop other questions later, you can certainly email me. You can find my contact information on the Business Career Services website. Email is CATHEYME, Cathey, ME @appstate.edu. As I said as well, I'm open for kind of more in-depth coaching discussions if you want to go a little bit further into Gallup CliftonStrengths, or just some other discussions about how you can really emphasize these strengths, build on them, and use them as you talk about yourself. Thank you all very much then for joining us, and I hope you join some of our other workshops the rest of the today and tomorrow, and definitely be registering for the career fair on Friday. Be sure that you are going ahead and finding out which companies you want to speak with and registering for their group sessions or one-on-one sessions so that you have your schedule all created to just meet a lot of great recruiters on Friday. Thanks very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.